Hello, Avila economics students. I hope everyone had a safe and happy 4th of July. So we're July 5th, 2020, and we are beginning week 3 on Monday. So just make sure to wrap up everything from week 2 before Sunday at midnight, and I'll try to have everything graded by Monday or Tuesday. So for this week, we're going to look at chapter 19 and 20, and make sure to follow that with your Pearson My Econ Lab. Again, I highly encourage you to start those earlier in the week and don't wait until the weekend. Try to maximize your points. And then stay on top of the forum discussions. I encourage you to jump in earlier as opposed to waiting until Thursday. Make sure to give yourself enough time to have fully developed paragraphs when you post and when you respond to your peers. So, all right. So for this week in chapter 19, you're going to discuss the concept of elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply. Essentially, why we care about elasticity is demand, because as business managers or firms, we want to try to maximize total revenue, and by maximizing total revenue, we can maximize the profits. So certain goods are going to be considered inelastic that we sell, goods and services, other goods elastic. And we need to know that so that way we can price accordingly, because consumers may react differently to price changes. So by technical definition, very general definition, elasticity of demand is just the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change of price. So you think about the law of demand, we expect as the price goes up, inverse relationship, the quantity demand would go down. And when we measure this, they actually do what's called an arc price, or an average between 2 points on a demand curve. And what you're going to look at is that when this value is calculated, they're going to say, is it between 0 and 1? If it's 0 and 1, it's inelastic. If it's 1, it's called unit elastic. And if it's greater than 1, it's elastic. And think of it like elasticity as your responsiveness. You think about a rubber band that stretches, how elastic or responsive something is. If people are very responsive to price changes, they're very elastic. That means if the price just moves a little, they're going to stop buying that product and switch to something else, go to a substitute. If they're inelastic, it's very tight. And think of like gasoline. Right now it's still relatively cheap, about $2 a gallon here in Kansas City. But if it went up to $3 tomorrow, you're not going to change how much you buy of gas very much. I'd argue it probably is going to be $4 or $5 before you stop filling up your tank and find some other alternative, like riding a bike or taking a bus. People will shift their consumptions away from other goods and services in order to just pay for the gasoline and get back and forth. So in the short run, you don't have a lot of choices, but in the long run, things can become much more elastic. And there are factors that kind of deal with the elasticity of demand. The time, if you need something now, if you need to get on a flight tomorrow to Los Angeles, you're going to probably pay the highest price for the ticket. But if you have planned well months in advance, the airlines are going to set aside a certain number of seats for those that have very elastic demand. And their objective is try to fill up that entire flight, maximize the revenue. So it's a good example of price discrimination. They charge different prices for every single seat on that plane. Those that want first class, to me it's kind of silly. You're still getting from point A to B, but some people are willing to pay like double a price just to avoid sitting next to, I guess, the screaming kid. So but it's somebody's choice, and obviously that kind of goes to income. The airlines know that those that have very high incomes have more inelastic demand, and they're willing to pay that higher price for an airline ticket to get to point A to B, because they can afford to, because it's less of a percentage of their overall incomes. But somebody that is making less income, they're going to be scrutinized every good and service that they buy, and their demand is going to be much more elastic. So you're also going to look at that in terms of elasticity of supply, the percentage change in quantity supplied over the percentage change in price. Again, this could be inelastic, elastic, and it's from a business perspective. The first side is from the consumer, this is from businesses. So businesses have different elasticities of supply too. If you're going to look at some extreme cases in the textbook, perfectly inelastic kind of line straight up and down here. If I can kind of get this, I think of the letter I is perfectly inelastic demand or inelastic supply. Perfectly inelastic demand would be I need the insulin shot so in order to survive. So if it goes from $20 to $40, I'm going to pay it. So I'm not going to change the quantity demanded at all. Perfectly inelastic supply would be like a concert at a stadium. There's only so many seats, unless you build a bigger stadium. That supply is inelastic. Perfectly elastic is a horizontal line going across. It means people are extremely responsive. We'll look at that in perfect competition when we get to it. That says you raise the price a penny, I stop buying it at all. And same thing with supply. It's going to be perfectly elastic supply. So any small changes in price will be that I will supply nothing at all. So you're also going to look at the concept of cross-price elasticity and income elasticity. This ties into our discussion earlier about the 4 different types of goods. With cross-price elasticity, basically you're trying to determine, is this a inferior good or a substitute good or a complementary good. A complementary good would be this. If gasoline goes way up and all of a sudden you see the decline in SUV sales go way down because gas has got so expensive, that tells you it's a complementary good. If you see the price of Lucky Charms go way up and the quantity demanded of Magic Puffs go way up, that tells you it's a substitute good. Income elasticity looks at whether the good is a normal good or inferior good. So as income rises, we tend to buy less goods that we consider inferior. Like I know in college students, a lot of times they eat ramen noodles. Okay, when I was in college, I ate a lot of canned spaghetti. Got me through the week. I was poor. I didn't have a lot of money, but it worked. But as my income went up, I didn't have to buy ramen noodles or cheap spaghetti anymore. So if we see that the income goes up, the quantity demanded of that particular good goes down, we know it's inferior. If income goes up, we see the quantity that demanded of that good go up too. Say furniture, that would tell us that it's a normal good. All right, last chapter 20, I think you'll find this interesting about consumer choice. Almost essentially everyone has what we call like a budget constraint, that we have a certain amount of income that we have in a period of time, and the goal is to maximize our level of happiness. And Jeremy Bentham kind of, along with others, John Locke came up with this, philosophers a long time ago, that there's this level of happiness. We call it utility in economics. And we try to consume goods and services to maximize that level of happiness. So we'll allocate our dollars and expenditures of goods and services to make that overall total utility maximize. Of course, sometimes we make mistakes on this. You buy something, later you find out that that wasn't a very good buy. But given the available information, if you're rational, you're going to try to allocate those dollars to give you the most happiness over your lifetime or period of time. So we can look at comparisons, like say that I had a Big Mac, or let's make it a cheeseburger at McDonald's. That's maybe $2, okay, and an ice cream cone, that's $1. If I had $7, I could look at, okay, let's say that the first cheeseburger gave me 20 utils, and a utils is just a kind of a, it's not a real thing, but it's a way of kind of measuring it, abstract. Let's say the first cheeseburger gave me 20 utils, it cost $2. Well, the marginal utility, I went from 0 to 20 because I got 20 utils. It cost me $2, so I take that 20 divided by 2. Oh, I get 10 utils per dollar. An ice cream cone, however, let's say I only get like 5 utils for the first consumption of an ice cream cone, and it cost me $1. So I take that 5 utils divided by $1. I say, oh, okay, I've got 5 utils per ice cream cone per dollar. When I make my decision, I say, okay, what should I spend my money on? Well, I get 10 over here for the cheeseburger. I get 5 over here, utils per dollar. Oh, I'm going to spend that first $2 on the cheeseburger. Of course, the assumption is that as I consume more cheeseburgers, my utility is going to decline. That's the idea of diminishing marginal utility. So at some point, I go through these calculations. We don't actually do this, on a piece of paper. We're doing this in our head. That says, I don't want to, at some point, maybe after the third cheeseburger, it's not worth it anymore. I'm going to switch to an ice cream cone. But we made this rational choice, and that's what you're going to see in the textbook, where the marginal utility of good X over the price of good X is equal to marginal utility of good Y over the price of Y. So the last kind of tie of that is called like the substitution and income effect. And essentially, demand technically is based purely on the substitution effect, but the idea of like relative prices. So if a price does drop, in the example in the textbook they gave like an application, but it could be anything for like even the cheeseburgers. If the price of the cheeseburger in the example I gave you dropped to $1, you might consume more cheeseburgers because the relative prices have changed. But the substitution effect compared to the income effect, you think about the income effect says, if we have a fixed income and prices go up, I'm poor. But if prices go down, like the example of a Big Mac or my cheeseburger example, going from $2 to $1, I can consume more of those goods. So we're still going to reallocate our choices to maximize that total utility. So, but again, in the textbook example, and they pointed out here with the substitution effect, and I'm just going to read this right here. It says the tendency of people to substitute cheaper commodities for more expensive commodities. And that's kind of said based on that law of demand. And if the price drops for that, the substitution effect would lead us to purchase more of those goods. Because you're basically saying, yeah, that utility per dollar is increasing up to a point. The last thing I think I'll just kind of mention here, and we'll wrap up for week 3, is about the behavioral economics. They mentioned this, and whether people are rational with the choices that they make all the time. There's two group economists. One that says it doesn't matter if some people don't maybe act rational all the time. It says a group they act rational, that they're making good decisions about purchases that they're making. And there's others that say they're not rational, they're irrational. And there's some evidence to this. Economists have looked at the subprime crisis where people were buying homes that they could not afford. They were leveraging themselves on second homes. They weren't really thinking about the consequences if they didn't have enough income to if the price of the home went down. But other rational economists say, well, given the information they had at the time, they were making rational decisions. So, but I think it kind of goes both ways in terms of whether people are rational or irrational. What I would argue for you all, is really think about anytime you buy a good or a service. I kind of like to go back to the timeless utility theory. Is this really going to make me happy in the long run? Do I really need this? Or by buying this, is this going to make me unhappy in the future because I have so much debt and I'm so burdened by this that my consumption actually declines in the future and I feel worse off? So, like, who does this benefit? Now, of course, any economist will tell you that when you buy goods and services, that does help the U.S. economy. But you have to think about yourself. What kind of position am I putting myself in? Am I over-leveraging myself for just material goods or eating out all the time? And then what happens if you believe in modern portfolio theory is you have these big swings and up and down, whether things are really good, then all of a sudden things are really bad. So the goal in a lifetime is kind of like keep this level. So you're just kind of like having minor ups and downs. But your goal is to try to maximize your net worth in order to maximize your happiness. So, okay, so that was it for this week. But look forward to talking online. I won't jump into the discussion to respond to everyone, but I'll jump in once in a while. I'll try to get to everybody through the course. But if you have any questions, do email me. And otherwise, have a great week. We'll talk to you online. Take care.